In what feels like the final step before the season starts, the Texans have announced their team captain, so let's talk about it.
To throw the punches on. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Tagged down for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to this Bullpen Bit. I am James Roy, and today we're talking about the Texans team captains. Before we get started, if you are unfamiliar with the Bullpen, it is a Texans podcast, and if you're looking for one of those, you should subscribe to us anywhere you get your podcasts, however you listen to them. If you just search The Bullpen, a Houston Texans podcast, we will pop up, so make sure you look for us. Tom and I are doing previews, recaps, lives, the whole 9 yards. Just make sure you're tuned in so that we can bring you the best Texans content from the best veteran-owned Texans podcast on the market. So let's get started. The Texans announced their team captains as expected: 3 offense, 3 defense, and a special teamer. The team captains are as follows. It is CJ Stroud, Laramie Tunsil, and Stephon Diggs. We're definitely going to talk about that in a minute. Defensively, it is Will Anderson Jr., Jimmy Ward, Azeez Al-Shaair, and then for the special teams team captain, it is John Weeks, which I think surprised some people, but if you know the Texans, he's the longest tenured player, a leader in the locker room. It's not surprising that they went with the long snapper for the special teams team captain. Let's not bury the lead. Let's talk about Stephon Diggs as a team captain. The obvious talking point here is that a lot of teams, specifically Bills and Vikings fans, would tell you 100 times over that Stephon Diggs is a locker room cancer, not a good guy to have around. And so understanding that this is voted on by other players, the players within the Texans locker room decided that the locker room cancer and diva that you don't want around your players is the best fit for their team captain. So it either speaks very poorly to the players in the locker room or it speaks very highly to who Stephon Diggs is as a player. I would go with the latter. I would say that Stephon Diggs, a proven veteran who throughout this offseason, based on what we've seen as fans, has given us no reason to believe he's a problem, showed up and immediately took on the role of a veteran wide receiver who's been in the league for 10 years and earned the role of being the Texans team captain. I mean, I don't know. I think it's that simple. There's a lot of pharmaceutical grade copium, is what I like to call it, going around with the Bills and Vikings fan bases. And I've talked about it at length before, but I'll bring it up here. A lot of their frustrations that are founded with Stephon Diggs occur over time. And so even if Stephon Diggs was on track to become this diva locker room cancer in the Texans locker room, he is under contract for 1 year. So the Texans can literally let him go after this year. I would only become concerned about that if the Texans decided to bring him back. That's probably a situation that I would track closely, but just based on where the Texans are at right now and what Stephon Diggs' tenure looks like, based off the signs we have, it looks like he's just a 1-year rental. I'd love for him to come back if he wants to, and if he does really well. And I think that if the Texans sniff a Super Bowl or win one, I think that's a high probability. But I don't think there's any reason to be concerned at this point with the persona that Stephon Diggs carries. I don't foresee him deteriorating to where he was at in his worst mental state. That's what he said, his worst mental state of his career in his last season with the Bills. Outside of Diggs, Stroud is unsurprising. I think it may have surprised some people last year that he was picked as a team captain, but I mean, I think that, and this is to speak to Caleb Williams got picked as a team captain. Quarterbacks generally, as long as they're good and are good with the locker room, will be picked as team captains. It is a position that is, I don't want to say it's easier to make it as a team captain, but like, if you knew anything about CJ Stroud, knowing what we know now, it's unsurprising that he was picked as a team captain. And I think that Caleb Williams being picked as a team captain for the Bears is an indicator of what's to come there. But unsurprising there. And then Laramie Tunsil, also entirely unsurprising. In his time with the Texans, he's been widely considered to be a leader in that locker room. So not anything to speak of more on the offensive side. Very unsurprising picks. Defensively, there's also not a lot of surprises. Now, to speak to Will Anderson Jr., relative to what I just said about CJ Stroud, it was a bit more surprising that Will Anderson Jr. was named a team captain last year, and I think it spoke more to who he was as a player and how influential he is. We know now, based off of how DeMeco Ryans talks about Will Anderson, when he talks about bringing rookies into the culture and how he says, look at Will, look at what he does, and we know what a culture setter that Will Anderson is. I would have been shocked if he wasn't a team captain this season. So great that he got picked for that. I think it speaks to who he is as a player. Excited for year 2 of Will Anderson. Jimmy Ward being picked as team captain again, I think is something that a lot of Texans fans should take a second to look at. He was, like I said, he was last year, is this year. His presence in that locker room is important, and I've said it that this season, a healthy Jimmy Ward is going to be vital to this Texans defense performing at the level it needs to, especially in the secondary, but just as a whole. His mentality, if you've seen the camera on him whenever they're getting ready to play, I mean, what he brings to the table defensively, it should come as no surprise that he was picked as a team captain. And it should really emphasize how important a healthy Jimmy Ward is to this defense. Now, Azeez Al-Shaair shouldn't be surprising from the standpoint that he played linebacker on a team led that was coordinated defensively by DeMeco Ryans. That was a weird way to say that, but I'm going to leave it in. But Azeez Al-Shaair being picked, like I said, not surprising. I think that it's interesting just looking at the previous set of team captains, how there wasn't a linebacker picked last time. So linebacker being in a lot of ways viewed as the quarterback of the defense. Azeez Al-Shaair being picked as a team captain should make a lot of sense from that perspective too. But I do really like the set of defensive captains this year. There's not really anything else to say about it. It's solid pickup and solid vote by the players. The last one to speak to is John Weeks. Last year, the Texans, at least early on, did not have a special teams team captain, but it would be expected that if someone stood out in that way, they would be picked. And John Weeks is the longest tenured player on the roster. He should be, in a lot of people's opinion. I'll throw my hat in the ring of believing that he should be early pick for Ring of Honor when he retires, just based off his tenure and how long he's been there, how influential he's been. And so I think that John Weeks as a pick gives you that special teamer. Kaimi Fairbairn could have been a good pick if you were dead set on picking a special teamer, and I think he has been in the past, if I remember correctly. But John Weeks just makes a lot of sense. I think that in the locker room, just the way that the guys talk about him and the way they view him, shouldn't come as any surprise that John Weeks was picked as a team captain. Now, last thing I want to talk about is so early in the season, the Texans added 3 team captains after their initial announcement. So I'm going to go based off of that. There are 3 of the 7 team captains last year that are not team captains this year. Those players are Jalen Petrie, Robert Woods, and Steven Nelson. Now, Steven Nelson obviously left the team on less than great terms and retired. So it's not surprising in any way that he is not a team captain. Honestly, looking back at it, it's almost surprising that he was a team captain, but looking back at like the mic'd up with Jalen Petrie and at the way he interacted with the team, I think within the team it makes sense, especially for that team, the 2023 team, that he was picked as a team captain. Robert Woods, obviously when you make the roster as a veteran presence in the receiving core that's really stacked, not really the best player, well respected, but there was just better options, I think, offensively this year for team captain in by way of Stephon Diggs. Last year, you didn't really have a true veteran outside of Robert Woods in the receiving core. Now you do. And so I understand why he probably did not get picked as the team captain this year. Now, Jalen Petrie is the only player of these 3 that I believe had a reasonable claim just based off how he's viewed within the locker room. From a tenacity standpoint, I would argue that maybe the reason he wasn't picked this year could revolve around the step back he took in coverage last year. But I think that, I wouldn't be surprised if with the way they're changing his usage this season, I wouldn't be surprised to see him step up and be a team captain next year. Well, that's it for this Bullpen Bit. Thanks for tuning in, listening to my thoughts on this Texans team captain group. This is, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, the last legitimate step before the Texans step onto the field and play real football this Sunday. So incredibly excited to see that. You can find me, I'm James Roy, at James Roy NFL on Twitter and at M1 Texans Fan on Instagram. And if you want to follow the podcast and keep up with it, that's the best way we've got right now to do that. So make sure you're tuned in. If you're looking for the YouTube channel, you can use my Twitter handle to find it. And if you're looking for us, like I said, on any podcast platform that you listen to podcasts on, just search The Bullpen, a Houston Texans podcast, and we'll pop up. Thanks for watching, listening, whatever it is you're doing there. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.
Take the handoff. Stroud looking. Stroud